Hi, good evening, Galleonites. This is Mayor Tom O'Leary, back after, I don't know, a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. Made a decision to, uh, allow uh, this program to kind of see if there was any demand for it. I don't think there was any popular demand for it, but there were certainly some issues that have come up over the last week or 10 days that I think deserve some amplification. They also deserve an opportunity for people who are genuinely following some of the issues that relate to uh, electric power cost adjustment, and then also how we're going to tackle as a city government some outstanding debts in both our water and sewer fund, but I think particularly what was the intent of last week's utility committee meeting was really to talk about sewer rate adjustments. And so, any event, one thing leads to another. What I think been dying for a while to use the word conflate. I hope I use it properly, but there has been a conflating, meaning a mixing of the issues that revolve around uh, necessary revenue, what we've done to control expenses, what some of the measures to control expenses probably are debatable in their terms of their longer term wisdom. But uh, what is are those issues that are important to understanding how we have an obligation of the city to manage those utilities, those enterprise funds, so that our costs are met and that we don't create any kind of financial hardship for the city. That those issues have been tied in with what, quite honestly, is an ongoing a challenge in trying to get rid of and correct, rather, not get rid of, but correct violations that are at our water treatment plant. I think also that are in our distribution system on the water side. So, um, some of the press accounts have taken a discussion of whether or not we need to make a power cost adjustment. Some questions we can get into that. Pretty quickly you get into what a lot of viewers would consider gobbledygook, but we want to try as much as we can to separate the compliance issues with Ohio EPA and our ongoing need to correct outstanding violations, and the issue of revenue sufficiency and whether costs are part of the problem, whether we're spending too much in one of the utilities, or if we simply can't maintain at the rates that we have. Going back, not so much in water, they were raised approximately a year ago, but in sewer going back 3 or 4 years since they were adjusted. So the question becomes, can we keep bumping along and yet still have sufficient revenue to operate the utility? And I think most important, I don't want to drone on and on, but most important is that while we've incurred debt for some capital improvements in the wastewater treatment system, we have simply um, uh, renewed the notes. We have not paid down that debt, and it's not because we don't realize the need and the costliness to roll those notes over, but we really don't have the revenue in the current rate base to be able to tackle those debts incurred in the last 4 or 5 years. And so it's really what I was asking council, the committee, to look at last week. Our PCA, because that's required in an ordinance, that needs to be looked at by council in February and in August. And then secondarily, what does council want to do um, about revenue and revenue adequacy in the sewer fund? So it's a complicated subject. I'll only say one more thing, and then we can talk about some other positives that are going on. Um, and that is, it's very complicated. And so, what is frequently the desire of people who have questions is to get a short 3-sentence answer to what's a really complicated question. And so I'm going to err on the side of trying to explain the subject versus giving a simple answer, which is often wrong or doesn't reflect all that's out there. I don't think I mentioned Matt, but I really want to hit. If I already did, I'll go ahead and hit it again. I can't remember. It seems like 3-4 years since we had as much snow at one time or over one 24, 36-hour period. But in any case, I really want to thank the service department crew for being out there. They logged a lot of overtime. They were, by and large, very responsive. And although we have cleanup work to do tomorrow, particularly in the uptown area, I think we're going to have a crew come in early, 4 or 5 o'clock. We'll see when they mobilize, and before the traffic and the cars begin to want to use Harding Way, we're going to try to get as much of those large snow drifts out of the way. So just wanted to note that we don't see the job as complete. There's this follow-up work to do, and we're hoping that that'll happen as early as tomorrow. It might go on into Wednesday, but we'll kind of see how tomorrow goes. One last thing before we switch gears and talk about tomorrow night's meeting and anything that might be on people's minds, is it's important to note, because there was, when you have that much snow, or when right before that we had so much water, I think people have a reason to be frustrated and want to get their service provided to them. But it's really important to note that the city is doing that work with the same number of staffers that we've had since 2004. So when people might observe that, well, you're out of fiscal emergency, why haven't things changed? Well, one of the things is we haven't added to staff. We've kept that staff as minimized as possible, and then of course when you have a peak issue or a peak demand, certainly things get stretched. But I want to note those 3 things. Thank them. Note that we're going to try to take care of the snow drifts tomorrow, and then note that the staffing level is kind of where it was, really, 17, 18 years. So I'm throwing bouquets at the service department. I think it's also worth noting that, as always is the case, that the police and fire department, were out there, and that's not the kind of job y'all would want, and we need to thank them. The good, one of the blessings, if you'll allow that term, is that we didn't have any widespread power outages. So I don't know if it was a combination of some of the maintenance that they're doing, or if the weather came through in a way that we didn't have that buildup of ice that I think we were talking about early mid part of last week. So that's what's going on. I think just to get off of the issues of the quality of drinking water, only by saying that we are working at it. We're moving ahead, and I think we're close to having the supervisor position on Railroad Street filled, and so we're anxious to get that in place. I think that will really help the pace of our corrective action in compliance with OEPA. But anyways, other things are going on. We got a couple of good bids on the bike path extension. We'll be signing that contract soon. Kind of an aggressive completion date, so we're real anxious to get that done. While mosquitoes are still flying around, but that project is finished up. The the replacement shelter, which is like it's hard to say it got here. It finally got here down at Heisey Park. That old what is known as the Frank shelter. I think anybody who has used it or looked at it would recognize its better days are behind it, and so there's a new, almost I guess I'll call it ready to assemble pavilion. It kind of came last week, and you got to be kidding me! Inconvenient time with the weather and stuff. So we've got a foundation to get in place. There's funding out of the freeze fund to cover that and cover the cost of that, and so that'll be a two-step process: get the foundation in, and then get the structure in, get it rewired, and I think if there's a good news is with its kind of winter delivery, is that we should have it completed before too many of the big holiday weekends. There's a lot of stuff that happens in all of our shelters around graduation, and then we get into that family reunion stuff, school field trips. There's a group that uses that shelter almost every day. Brings a busload of kids over to Galleon and eats lunch, and then frequently swims there. So all that being said, we'll look forward to those two projects. We'll be reconnecting as the weather changes to make sure that the city can do everything with the volunteer group out at East Park that's rebuilding the baseball field. So that in budget, we're actually scheduled to spend more money than we'll collect. Now we have a fund balance that will be able to absorb that, but we're running out of fund balance to absorb. So what I would like to have council look at is enough of a raise to correct this operating deficit and to begin. And it's not internal costs, things that we can control, but they are cost of power, and that is largely out of our control. So I don't know if I muddied the water with that or not. And I understand that. I'm not excited about raising rates, but I think council will wait to see that, and I'll let Auditor Satterfield answer the question about how many weeks, how long it's going to be till the books are reconciled. I was told late today that after spending a day with the state auditor, they got June reconciled. So, and if there's 7 more work sessions, our availability, or the state auditor's availability to come and help us, pretty limited. So my hope is auditor's office will catch on pretty quick, and that's a matter of weeks. But if it's a matter of months, I really don't. I don't understand why the reconciliation is going to tell you something that you don't already know. The other part I would want to mention, since reconciliation came up, is that Mark knows this. I must have forgotten it. That the recommendation from the consultant involves a look back at historic power costs, but half of the recommendation has to do with expected power costs over the next 6-month period. So the reconciliation won't have any impact on what the projected future power costs are going to be. So, anyways, it's really not a legitimate issue, this issue of waiting for reconciliation, but I mean, people ought to come to council meeting and express their opinion if they disagree with that. Real important to note that the recommendation for power cost adjustment moving forward is based on the historic cost, but it's equally based on the projected cost. So waiting a few more months to find out what the historic costs were and where we are in terms of a cash fund balance really doesn't address the issue of trying to keep our collections at pace with, staying up with the increased power bills. So that's all I'm saying. Well, no, I'll say one thing. Another thing that's really irked me for a week or so is Art doesn't represent all of that. I'm not talking about him. I'm talking about the notion that we gave money back to our customers so that the COVID experience was a little less onerous on them. That somehow, now I maniacally want their money back. Not very productive. Not very. So anyway, I'm waiting for out of the whole 7 of them, meaning the council, an idea. If they have a better idea about what to do, we're going to wait till reconciliation. That's not an idea. It doesn't address any of the important issues. You look at the budget, you look at this seriously, what you see is that while we've limited spending, we've also state EPA doesn't make the job any easier. And so we could spend a half hour talking just about the relationship between the regulators and city government and the relative little latitude that we have, to be able to satisfy them and keep costs down for customers as much as possible. So, all right, we got anything else?
No.
I probably, if there was a remote control to throw at their thing, maybe some people are doing that. I think I guess my closing thought on that real quickly is that if you follow it, put in the time to understand what's being recommended. There's the lack of following of facts. It would really be important before people voted on any of this stuff to actually read the ordinance that governs it. I'm waiting for, and council, maybe this is what they're waiting for, is a recommendation from the service director and the auditor. Historically, since the ordinance was changed a few years ago, that they had been sort of a joint recommendation. I'm not sure the service director. I'm hoping the service director and the auditor will have the same recommendation about what needs to be done with the power cost adjustment. So, what else we got, Matt? Anything you can think of?
Nope.
Okay. Well, we're going to try to come back on some sort of irregular basis, particularly when there are issues to address. But I think for most citizens that a little bit of city government probably goes a long way. So feedback as to what you need a little bit more of or a little bit less of in terms of information from the city. We're open to that, and the whole purpose of doing this is to substitute for the lack of local news, and if possible have a first-hand account. A lot of the articles that have been done recently with the city of Galion, the reporter's not even on site, and I don't want to open up a can of worms, but somewhere along the line, I guess I got old, where there used to be a reporter that would observe what was going on and then ask questions of various points of view. Now people sit at home and watch it on television.